same picture.
Hey everyone! If you like RPGs as much as I do, then I am pretty sure you've seen the latest Xbox presentation of Fable, which is shaping up to be one of the most interesting games of this year. However, the feeling that I got when looking at this game, seeing how combat works and listening to some of the things that the developers said, I thought to myself, wait, this feels like The Witcher 3 on some kind of British steroids. And I wasn't the first to notice it. In November 2024, it was reported that Jez Corden, who's seen the alpha version of Fable, said this.
You can tell that this game has CD Projekt Red DNA. Playground Games, they picked up a bunch of developers from CD Projekt Red, and I believe they picked up the combat designer. And you can kind of tell, you know. I'm not saying it's 100% one-to-one with Witcher, because it's not. But you can kind of tell that melee combat, the sort of the pirouettes and the dodging and the dodge rolling and the seamless, like, you know, hack and slash into an execution, which looks really, really cool. All that stuff is there.
Now, I know that while we could have replayed The Witcher 3 numerous times since 2015, we're still yet to play Fable, but the amount of footage we got and all the things the devs already said, I think we can do our first comparison between these two games, make some assumptions and educated guesses, and once I'm able to actually play it at some point, we can revisit my initial take from this video. Treat it like a comparison preview kind of thing. I'll compare these two games in terms of their approaches to open world and NPCs, talk about things like reputation, approach to decisions influencing the game world, compare the combat systems, we'll talk graphics, and more. Everything is divided into chapters for your convenience, and there might be a lot of it, so no more boring intros, let's get on with it. Let's begin with the open world. Playground Games hit us with the heavy info from the start that the whole area of the game will be one seamless open world, which means no loading screens if you just travel the world, though most probably you will encounter some kind of loadings while fast traveling, as is usually the case. The Witcher 3 consisted of hubs, and they worked as locations of really varying sizes, especially if you compared the Vizima Castle to the whole of Velen. Now, Fable's seamless open world is obviously a really nice marketing buzzword, but it's not just one huge plot of land. Conceptually, it seems to be divided into two parts, one featuring Bowerstone, the kind of capital of Albion, and the other northern part with a seemingly less civilized Bloodstone, where two gangs fight it out for power and where the Cult of Shadows exists. Definitely less civilized area. Obviously, the areas aren't all about the capital cities, as we're supposed to get these different places, be that the coast, the mountains, magical forests, basically the magical Albion as we know it from previous games. It feels like these places might serve as biomes, and I imagine that while there will be no limitations as to when you can travel to these locations once you get out of the prologue, there is probably going to be some kind of suggested path you'll be encouraged to take, maybe related to quests at increasing levels or the levels of monsters. Don't really expect an Elden Ring kind of approach. Now, like I said before, The Witcher instead went for big hubs and built varied areas within those hubs, but all centered around some main themes. The Nordic-inspired islands of Skellige, the war-torn Velen, or beautiful Toussaint that's so disconnected from the rest of the world with its fairy tale vibes. Is any of the approaches better in principle? I wouldn't say so. For me, it's just a creative decision that the devs made. While it's nice to have a seamless open world, I don't care for it that much. Loading screens were never really an issue for me in The Witcher 3. The hubs were so big that for a long time I forgot there were any loading screens to be had, so for me, subjectively, there's no huge value in having that seamless open world that Fable promises. I absolutely don't mind it, but the only thing that remains an open question is, what's the trade-off for making it happen? Because looking at the footage, I get the feeling that one of those trade-offs might be a 30 FPS lock on consoles. But let's leave it for later though. This open world has to be populated by someone, and here's where Fable comes in really strong as well. The devs claim that there are over 1,000 handcrafted NPCs that live in this world, and they are very much simulated to resemble real living citizens of Albion with their daily schedules. Apparently, you'll be able to talk to every NPC as they're fully voiced, they all have their unique names as well, and you're supposed to be able to get into relationships with them, hire them to work for you, or become their landlord if you own the property they live in. If you compare it to The Witcher's approach, the difference is noticeable. One thing is, The Witcher 3 was heavily criticized for the initial attack of the clones. There was also a clear division into more important NPCs and what I called the background noise NPCs. There was this illusion of real people populating the world, their day-night cycle influenced how busy the streets were and what people were doing, but I wouldn't say they felt a true part of this world with a fully simulated day and night cycle. They always felt like a cast of extras in this big playground built specifically for Geralt. But if we're looking for a game that does that in a similar but not exactly the same way as Fable intends to do it, we would have to look at Kingdom Come Deliverance. KCD2 perfected the NPC simulation and how they go about their daily lives. NPCs are one of the coolest things in KCD2, and you can expect them to behave in a certain way as the day goes by. But while that simulation runs all the time and you need to plan where you can find people at a certain time of day, Warhorse also focused on how these NPCs react to the player's actions on an immediate level. The prime example is that if you drop a valuable thing on the ground, NPCs may take it depending on who they are. If it's clothes and they don't fit that NPC's intended preset, they might put it in a chest that's shared with other NPCs in their house. But if that element of clothing fits someone else's preset who uses that chest, they can then take that item of clothing and wear it the next day if it's better than what they already owned. That's super cool. Now, I think Fable is going in a bit of a different direction. They said explicitly that you can romance all these people, you can hire them, kick them out of the homes you own. They all actually have opinions on you based on your actions. So that feels like a higher level focus on a grander scale of things instead of more like down-to-earth events that can happen with the NPCs. Simply two different approaches. I'm really curious to see how this is going to work out, but NPCs and their reactivity, well, that point goes to Fable already. We'll see how this will work in The Witcher 4 though. I'm sure you remember the tech demo shown last June and how Ciri bumped into a guy carrying apples, which resulted in a kid running to pick up these apples. If the final game keeps that level of NPC interaction and it increases the overall feeling of being a part of the living world, KCD might have some serious competition. And then we will be able to compare The Witcher 4 with Fable. One very important part of the game that's related both to the world and to the NPCs is our main protagonist being able to acquire property in Albion. It means you can become an owner of a business and make money through this. You'll be able to hire NPCs to work there, but you're also going to be able to own houses. I like owning properties in games. I like when my protagonist has a place to call home, some kind of base of operations. But in The Witcher 3, Geralt is a Witcher. He has no place to call home, unless you count Kaer Morhen as a place he felt at home the most. That's why getting Corvo Bianco in Blood and Wine was such a big and important decision that CDPR made. You finally acquired something for yourself, you could actually decorate it, and you can spend a lot of money to renovate and rebuild parts of the vineyard. It's tied nicely to Geralt's dream he had for himself and Yennefer back in the books, but the property in Toussaint was more of a story-related location, a narrative tool of sorts, and a way to take all the money you made throughout the game. And it didn't really save any big gameplay purpose, despite having a garden for herbs or stables for Roach for some additional bonuses. Fable, on the other hand, gives us a whole other game within a game related to those properties. You can become a proper real estate tycoon if you play your cards right. And in Fable 3, for example, it paid off to make a lot of money, with a lot of cash being needed for saving the kingdom, and to still be considered a good ruler, you kind of had to abuse the game systems in order to remain good and fulfill your promise to the people. I'm really curious to see how far you can take this system in the new Fable, how in-depth you can get with choosing NPCs for a job, whether their own personal traits and behavior influence how well they perform in the workplace you put them in. But having this extensive system of properties in place means that your own place, and I imagine you will own a house for you and your family, might feel less special than Geralt's first ever home. We'll have to wait and see for this one. I just hope the properties you own in Fable will be more meaningful than those you could acquire in Cyberpunk. Don't get me wrong, they were cool to have, but they didn't feel that useful at all, and it felt like a missed opportunity. Sounds like something to improve in Cyberpunk 2. Hey, maybe I should actually make a video about that. Ah, sorry, back to Fable. All that NPC talk and how your actions shape your place in the world means we have to talk about the reputation systems. Fable used to do this in a very good versus bad kind of way, and as a result, it was pretty simple. I liked that system. I truly believe there is a place for black and white instead of shades of gray in games these days especially, but in the new Fable, our reputation will be much more nuanced, and it's not necessarily good and bad for everyone. The devs gave the example that if you spend a lot of money on a property, you can be considered by some people, and let me quote here, a rich twat. I mean, fair. But not all NPCs will think the same of you. I imagine people with different social standings might appreciate your business prowess, while others will indeed think you're a prick. I don't yet know how to feel about this, cause, like I said, I sometimes like the clear good and bad in my actions, especially in this high fantasy setting, but maybe it will be less complicated than it seems for the time being. Now, as for The Witcher 3, you're right, there was no reputation system. Or was there?
Huh?
When CDPR released the Red Kit for The Witcher 3, people got to work fast, and what came as a result were some cut concepts brought back to the game. One of these early development concepts was a reputation system for Geralt that would influence how Geralt is perceived in various parts of the world, and that influences things like store prices or multipliers while bargaining in quests. Thanks to this new mod, you get the reputation from quests, from hunting monsters, horse racing, fistfights, and all the other small activities. Now, while CDPR did admit that they played around with this concept, this mod is apparently not the actual cut content left in the files, but the modder's own spin on it. It makes sense though, don't you think? Geralt's reputation as a witcher could open and close doors for him in the books. The tales of Butcher of Blaviken were spread far and wide, and Dandelion's ballads about the White Wolf definitely boosted the reach of the more heroic tales of Geralt. I wonder if The Witcher 4 will actually make use of the reputation system. After all, series' first true adventure is the new beginning for a new saga. For now though, the complexity of what Fable has to offer sounds really impressive, and I like that based on your reputation, NPCs actually comment out loud when they see you, though it's not a huge novelty in the series.
Yeah, we get it. You're rich.
Imbecile.
There's one big element that I have yet to talk about regarding all of that, and that's approach to decisions in the game, both big and small. In The Witcher 3, you were making decisions all the time. A lot of storytelling actually came from you interfering in matters of all shapes and sizes. Sure, you could decide whether to participate in the plot against Radovid. You helped the Bloody Baron with his very complicated situation, but you could also decide what to do with a monster that might seem scary but is actually harmless. Or you could allow a monster to take revenge, just like with that one quest with the werewolf, and the consequences of that action were limited to that quest only. Or on the other hand, you had simple quests like leading a goat back to a guy.
Bear, run, you stupid piece of shit.
These decisions mostly influenced the story, and they rarely influenced the game world on a bigger scale that you could see there and then. Not saying never, because obviously you handling the situation in Novigrad made a big change to how the population of the city looked like. There were strict searches at the gates and things like that. We're yet to see how Fable is going to handle all of that, but during the deep dive they shared one very flashy example of your decision actually influencing the game world. You meet this gardener called Dave. He drinks a magical growth potion and becomes a giant. Seeing how he's a very egotistical character, he becomes a nuisance in the area, so we will need to deal with him. You can spare him and find a solution to having a giant as a neighbor, or you can kill him. But apparently if you kill him, his body just lies there for the rest of the game, and it even affects house prices in the area, not mentioning reminding everyone of you and how you handled the whole situation. Now, this is a very marketing-oriented example because it makes headlines. It's the kind of example that makes it easy to grab people's attention and show something flashy about the game. What I'm really curious about is how often things like this will actually happen in the game. Not killing giants necessarily, but your actions shaping not only how some characters treat you, but also the landscape of the whole area. You know, if that giant quest is one of the 3 times it happens throughout 100 hours of playtime, it's not that impressive, but if it's a recurring element within more important quests, I'd dig that. In previous Fable games, there was this idea of decisions shaping how your character looks. If you were good, you looked like a good character, but if you were evil, then you suddenly could grow a pair of horns. Scary. This game abandons this concept because the morality in this game is supposed to be nuanced, and I'm curious to see how that's going to work. After all, nuance was the main thing about The Witcher. Not all good choices were good, and not all seemingly negative choices were the bad ones to make. We'll see whether losing that core element of Fable works out in the end. Oh, and one last thing connected to decisions and NPCs is a very divisive aspect of romance. Some people like them in games, some people hate them, others don't care about them at all. But here's where I think the approach that The Witcher 3 had beats Fable without it ever becoming a competition. The Witcher 3 has a very mature way of approaching romance. It's a true evolution of a relationship either with Triss, who's been around for 3 games, or with Yennefer, who appears for the first time in CDPR's games, but who is Geralt's true love from the books. And let's be real, it's not really a choice. Yennefer is the only one for Geralt, am I right? These romances were a narrative tool, they were meaningful. That's why when I now hear that you can basically romance all NPCs in Fable, you can marry them and have kids with them, well, I'm pretty sure it's a gameplay tool and not a meaningful story element. But that has its positives too. I mean, I just had this crazy idea that if there is an unlimited number of times you can have kids with various NPCs, you should be able to create a whole new workforce for your properties. Imagine if the whole of Albion actually becomes a family business, and it's no longer 1,000 handcrafted NPCs in the world. Now it's 1,000 handcrafted NPCs and another 1,000 children whose father is the hero of Albion. But that's assuming that there would be proper aging in the game and your kids would grow up to become adults. But since aging was previously in Fable, well, I know what I'm trying to do when the game comes out later this year. I just hope I don't become a walking STD. Now let's drop all the decisions, NPCs and small mechanics and instead focus on what we will be doing a lot of: combat. Combat wasn't something that was heavily praised in The Witcher 3, but I'd say it was good enough for what they wanted to achieve with this game. Light attacks, heavy attacks, bigger combos as you leveled up your character, casting signs here and there, sometimes using additional bombs, and you have a fun little combat loop, especially with all the dodges and rolls. And I'm not really mentioning the crossbow because it wasn't that useful, its usefulness was only in the water. Now, if you look at the new Fable, it kind of looks like The Witcher 3 combat, doesn't it? And that's exactly what Jess Corden mentioned in that quote from 2024. Sure, there's more magic here, and there's a bigger variety of weapons you'll be able to use, and that includes swords, sabers, hammers, bows, high-speed minigun crossbows for some reason, and of course a variety of spells. Oh, and look, when you knock your enemies off balance, you have a nice close-up finisher. That reminds me of something. One thing I am missing though is the overall lack of weight in those attacks. Sure, if you use a hammer and you send that enemy flying, it does give you this feeling of landing your hits nicely, but the rest feels too disconnected. Looking at the basic light attacks, I get this feeling of how Hogwarts Legacy felt in terms of combat. The big spells felt nice and flashy, but the basic attacks you had to spam for most of the time felt pretty underwhelming. That's the feeling I'm getting with Fable as well, although it might vary from enemy to enemy, especially if you have that cockatrice that tries to dropkick you like it ran away from WWE. I like some of the details in combat though. Hitting that phantom in its lantern might suggest weak spots on enemies. By the way, the phantom looks so much like wraiths in The Witcher 3, it can't be a coincidence, and I really like this moment when you shoot the skeleton in its leg and it trips to the ground. Really cool. But yeah, if I was to say what feels the most like The Witcher 3, it's definitely combat, and at the moment it's not shaping up to be the most exciting part of the game. But I'll be happy to revise my opinion once I actually play it and have more to say on the matter. And finally, let's talk about graphics and tech in general. From what I found online, the new Fable is built on Forza Tech, so an in-house engine created by Turn 10, and that is used in, you guessed it, the famous racing series. It's nice that it's not yet another Unreal Engine game, and it'll have its unique flavor, just like CDPR had with Red Engine, but obviously there are positives about using things like Unreal Engine instead of your own engine, especially when your own engine is made for a completely different genre of games. Anyone remembers first RPGs built on Frostbite? Yeah. But one thing we can say about Forza Tech is that it definitely supports big open worlds. Visually, the game looks really nice. There was a bit of controversy online after the trailer from 2024 that it can't really be gameplay. It looks too good to be real gameplay. Well, seeing more in the deep dive, it's safe to say that the game actually looks like that, even though some shots were obviously carefully selected to look the best they can. The big part of the overall look of Fable is its high fantasy art style, and I gotta admit, Playground did a really good job here. You might obviously prefer the more dark, bloody, and raw look of The Witcher. I actually do, but that dreamy fantasy setting fits the tone of Fable really well. It seems to look a bit less impressive in certain lighting settings, but overall I have to say that staying away from a more realistic style of The Witcher and going in that fairy tale direction feels like a good decision. I'm not the biggest fan of some of the shots that have lots of plants in proximity because they look a bit blurry, but I wonder how much of that is just compression of the video posted online and how much it's actually an issue with the depth of field, for example. One thing that worries me greatly though is the performance. I already hinted at it before, this game looks like it's meant to be 30 FPS locked on consoles when you look at all the animations. Also, a lot of gameplay footage we have here doesn't seem to be running that smoothly either. There are some noticeable frame drops pretty often. I mean, optimization and polishing happens mostly in the final stage of development, and I'm sure it will only run better and better from now on, but if you're wondering whether to pick it up on console or PC, I think I will go for the PC version. Unless the PS5 Pro manages to handle 60 FPS without losing the visual quality of the game, we'll have to wait and see. So how about comparing the two graphically? Well, I don't think it would be fair to do so because after all, The Witcher 3 came out in 2015. True, it received some visual upgrades along the way and it still looks great today, but I think we should look closer at the upcoming Witcher 4 instead. Now, I know Witcher 4 got a tech demo, not gameplay footage. This means that so much more resources could have gone into visuals because the game doesn't need to consider all the other systems working in the background. But seeing how openly CDPR wants the tech demo to be the target quality of the game, and seeing how amazing Cyberpunk 2077 looks when you crank it to the max, let's assume there is a universe in which The Witcher 4 looks like this. And suddenly the worlds of The Witcher and Fable are closer to each other artistically than before, even with how vibrant the colors are. If you look at details, Witcher 4 has more reactivity in how fabric behaves, but all the dangling elements in both games look really nice, whether that's on clothes or the sword sheath, for example. Big thumbs up for Fable for pretty good looking faces, though it seems Witcher 4 with Unreal will have a much better looking lip sync, if they manage to keep that level of quality. And I know if we compare Fable to The Witcher 3 as we're supposed to, the tables are turning, but it's been 11 years. Let's cut it some slack. And I'm actually going to put a pin in that here. I still have a lot of thoughts in my mind, some theories and ideas how some things might be working and how they might compare to The Witcher 3, which seems to be a huge inspiration for the devs here, but they are getting less and less factual, so I will leave it for another time. Or maybe I will be able to play the game before release and bring some proper hands-on impressions and revise my stance on these similarities and differences between the works coming from CDPR and Playground Games. For now, let me know what you think about Fable, and do you actually plan to play it? I have fond memories of this series, even though I didn't come back to it for a long time now. I mostly forgot how some of these things worked in the previous games. The new Fable seems like a good thing to play this year, and I actually got pretty excited after that last presentation. Oh, and by the way, what do we expect with that release date being autumn 2026? Late September maybe? Should be plenty of time between that and GTA 6. Thank you for watching. Take care.